Beyond also being a Jewish festival day, it is also National Coffee Day. Yay! And so here's a little bit of a joke. Did you hear about the woman who insisted it was a man's job to make the coffee in the morning? She showed him the Bible where it said Hebrews. Oh, man. Could I have done better than that? So I love unpacking music because so rarely do we ever know where music comes from, and I'm so appreciative that Brendan shared a little reflection on the music. In particular, the song The Blackbirds, of course, 1968, the Beatles, was on the White Album. How many had the White Album? My sister had the White Album. That's why I'm trying to say I'm too young to have the White Album. Most of the songs in the Beatles' White Album were written, little known fact, during a transcendental meditation retreat by Maharisha Mahesh Yogi in India. The retreat involved long periods of meditation conceived by the band as a spiritual respite from all of the worldly endeavors. In Lennon's words, it was a chance to get away from everything. So my connection to the song is when I was just 10 years old, living in Mississippi. Yes, that's me, and I think I have the same color pants on today. I didn't realize that till I looked at the picture. Larry said you look like you were a chubby young man. Actually, that's because I had to spread the picture. Okay? Yeah, So living in Mississippi, I first heard this song, Blackbird, and many of the fundamentalist Pentecostal preachers all over Mississippi, and especially in my town of Boonville, told us not to listen to the Beatles because they were not Christian. They were of the devil. The Beatles' White Album, when it came out and they realized that it was created in India, right, as they were on a meditation trip, that made it even worse because it was Hindu culture in India, written under the influence of a guru. And of course, this song would certainly lead you directly to the devil. But Blackbird really impacted and empowered my life in many, many ways. My desire to take my own brokenness and learn to fly, getting out of Mississippi and the oppressive family system in which I was born, finding my own voice, and after all, aren't we all a bit broken? This song, Blackbird, was inspired by J.S. Bach's Bourrée in E minor, another little-known fact. The lyrics are about the blackbird with sunken eyes and broken wings, but there is so much more. This is what Paul McCartney said about the song. He said, the line, "You were only waiting for this moment to arise," was about the black person's struggle in the southern states. No wonder I gravitated toward this song. I was using the symbolism, he said, of a blackbird. It's not really about a blackbird with wings or broken, but it's more symbolic and it's much deeper and metaphorical than that. He said Blackbird was inspired by the racial tensions that exploded in the United States in the spring of '68 as a symbolic way to support the civil rights movement. America was broken. War, Vietnam, civil rights for black and brown bodies. We as a people were in need of a new way of life and healing our broken wings, because he said America seemed no longer to fly. Sound familiar? McCartney also stated that the bird is British slang for a girl, which would make the blackbird a black girl, which was a reference for him to Rosa Parks, who learned to take her power and her brokenness that American culture had placed her in as a black woman, and she learned to fly as she started a bus boycott for a year. So he stated that this song is metaphorical and it can be used as a song of freedom in every and any circumstance. And if we're not free, if we can't fly, if our wings are broken and our eyes are sunken, he says, take note and fly toward the light. Pastor Susan last week attempted to give me a jump start on my message. I'm not going to follow her direction completely, except for the passage that she quoted during her message, and I want to play a little bit with that passage. It's this one. But those who hope in God will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles or blackbirds. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. This could be the summer of our lives. Taking the awareness of our broken wings, our broken selves, our broken hearts, our spirits, and allowing resurrection spring to breathe new hope, to breathe new life, to breathe new dreams, to breathe new expectations into our fall, winter hearts and spirits. Fall, by way of review, we let go. Sweeping the debris from our hearts and our spirits, we let go. Winter, we hibernate. We connect with our inner spirit and with God's spirit within. Winters can be harsh and cold and lots of inner spiritual work for all of us. And some things must die so that new life can come forth. And spring, of course, as Pastor Susan shared with us last week, is resurrection. It's those times when new life emerges. And summer is now our opportunity to live into whatever new thing was bursting from our lives. Right? So we live into the new thing that bursts into our lives. Whatever God is creating in us and through us. Isaiah 43:19 says, forget the former things, do not dwell in the past, but see I am doing a new thing. Summer is living into the new thing that springs forth from our lives. A very close friend of mine illustrated it this way. I was the director of the AIDS Network back in good old Madison, Cheesehead Land, Wisconsin. And this was one of my staff at the Madison AIDS Network. He worked with me in the Clean Needle Exchange program and assisted me in running a state-funded crystal meth program using a harm reduction model, which was an absolute disaster. He had been a meth head and had been clean for 5 years and was discovering his artistic edge. And he presented me with this painting that he said represented his life now in the summer of life, his time to live into his true self. And he said, you look at it this way, and what do you see? Sunset across. And you look at it this way? The sky. Sitting on a beach, looking at the ocean or looking at the sky, right? So there's different perspectives and different ways to look at it. And he shared with me, he said, James, and he gave this to me kind of in a really big, grandiose way at one of our big fundraisers and said, you've journeyed with me. He said, I was dying in the winter of my life. And in the fall, I was letting go. And in spring, you helped me to emerge differently. And finally, you get to walk with me in this new life, my new perspective, my summer of life. And he said, I get to be liberated and I get to be free to discover who I really am. Isn't life peculiar? Life is peculiar. It seems that the ones who are given the biggest dreams appear to have some of the worst obstacles and challenges in life and setbacks. Some of the brightest and most sincere, kind-hearted people I know have been dealt really a bad hand of cards. And oftentimes their lives are drenched with injustices and poverty and a lack of opportunities, and it crushes their spirits and causes self-doubt and discouragement, depression, and sometimes anger. The spirit is crushed and begins to feed the mind continuous negative thoughts that cause a vicious cycle of unhealthy choices. And I have to admit, I am a person who has had a pretty rocky road with God. I believe God is both incredibly distant and yet at the same time incredibly personal and actually inside this body of flesh. Probably not what you wanted to hear from your pastor, but oh well. I would in fact say I have been in a winter place ever since I returned from sabbatical, and I believe this too is a gift from God. And I asked God one day, and it was really about the blackbirds. I said, what about those people with broken wings, who've always walked rocky roads, people who have been given an unfair shot in life, it appears, who didn't get much of a break and always seem to be in darkness in the cold of winter and simply can't let go? Now, this may seem strange, but this is kind of the spirit response I got. I placed the most beautiful minds and spirits inside of those people, James. They are the ones with purpose far bigger than they can imagine. They have the gift of intuition coupled with feelings of compassion to change the world. They have been gifted with the ability to commune with God and hear God speak in their life. I don't know how many of you can relate to that. It kind of reminds me of, Jesus, who walked on this earth, and nothing ever seemed to really come easy for Jesus if you think about it. He was always pushing against the Pharisees and the Sadducees. His disciples didn't seem to understand a word he said. He didn't have a house. His life was kind of rocky and filled with potholes. And when Jesus walked this earth, he had a life of poverty and a life of hardship. He grew up poor with a single mom until she got married. But Jesus influenced the world in his poverty in incredibly powerful ways because he spoke of justice and he spoke of love. And he lived 2,000 years ago, and it has lasted this long. And he only lived 33 years. So like Jesus, a blackbird with broken wings hanging on a cross with broken legs and arms pierced through, he learned to fly right off the cross 3 days later. But in our reading this morning that was read in Spanish, Jesus takes his cue from the seasons of a fig tree. And he says, notice the fig tree. Some of you may have fig trees in your backyards. Look at the bud, Jesus says. What does it teach you? Jesus says it teaches you that God is just around the corner. God is just around the corner. Blackbirds with broken wings that learn to fly. It's our story. It's the story of us who have spent time in winter and fall, sometimes more than we've spent in spring and summer. Those people who encourage and empower with their stories of fortitude and strength. It's the stories of people who have been there and done that teach us love and hope and perseverance. It's those stories that plant seeds deep within our souls and our hearts and our bodies that makes us grow. So I say, grab all the summer you can get. It can be rare. Summers can be rare, except of course in Phoenix. But it is made even more beautiful by the fall and the winter and the springs in our lives. And as Pastor Susan said, summer is kind of the time just to kind of sit back in your lounge chair and enjoy what God has done. The summer's an exciting time in our lives when seeds of action are planted and then they come to fruition, benefiting everybody around us because the summer, spring in your step. And it motivates you to get more engaged, to get more involved in the falls and the winters and the springs. But just as an endless summer would scorch the earth as it does here in Phoenix, leaving it infertile, living into summers without taking a break is eventually going to burn you out, right? It's not natural in nature, and it's really not natural in our own lives. When you're in the heat of summer and you're winning, it's easy to become blinded by the light of your success. We get so attached to working and doing that you fail to let go of the season and move into the nature of fall and winter and cool off and chill out. There's an interesting story, and I'd like you to Google this because I'm not going to really unpack the whole story. Icarus is a Greek mythological figure. This is Icarus here, Jacob Peter Grau's The Fight of Icarus in the museum in Madrid. It tells the story of a father and a son who used wings to escape from the island of Crete. Anybody know the story? Icarus has become better known as the flyer who fell from the sky when the wax that joined his wings melted by the heat of the sun because he flew too close to the sun. That story you probably remember. This is actually some Phoenix street art representing the story. And I think the whole story really is about balance and equilibrium and moderation. The compromise between the risk of flying too high and melting wax with the sun or flying too low and weighing down the wings with the spray of water. It's all about balance as we fly with our newly healed wings. The series all started with the wisdom of the king or the queen from the book of Ecclesiastes, who said, "To everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven." It has been said before that the only constant in life is change. And even Adam Sandler said, "It's hard to soar with the eagles when you're surrounded by turkeys." Seasons will come and go. There are times we're surrounded by turkeys and times we're surrounded by eagles or blackbirds or whomever or whatever is surrounding us, encouraging us on the journey. But I think the truth of the matter is that everything in nature is constantly in flux, and our lives are constantly in flux. Our nation is constantly in flux. Our spiritual community is constantly in flux. Life is found in yielding to the river, yielding to the seasons, yielding to the turkeys sometimes who are enveloping us and maybe even holding us down, but finding ways to fly and to heal our broken wings. It's time to be both broken-winged blackbirds with sunken eyes and also times to be the eagle that takes flight and simply and powerfully soars toward the light. We embrace every season of our lives fully and we stop resisting those seasons. We become more fully alive. So I was trying to think of what's the best way to try to summarize a 4-session series on seasons is learn to dance with the seasons. That's kind of the best illustration I have. Embrace the changing of the seasons with stride, with joy. It's kind of our duty, it's kind of our honor, it's kind of really not a big choice, right? We don't have a choice because the seasons come and the seasons go. And to fully experience those seasons in our lives is to always learn to appreciate what those seasons may have to offer each of us. So in closing, I'd like to just encourage you to allow Spirit to take you on the adventure that Spirit wants you to have. Some of you may be like the blackbird flying on an eagle. I just love this photograph. It reminds me that sometimes you can't do it alone. Most often you can't do it alone. You're on somebody else's back and somebody else's shoulders, right? That we live on the shoulders and the backs of those who have gone before us, who have done this work, who have been eagles soaring and flying. So just keep that in mind and allow the Spirit to take you on the adventure that the Spirit wants you to have into every season, all of the various beautiful, amazing seasons of life. May it be so.